Good. All right, so we're going to get started. You guys can open up your books to the section that you read last night. You just said to finish chapter 2, is that correct?
3.
I went up to,
Oh, you started chapter. I'm sorry,
I
I'm
was
thinking of the other.
so pure.
Okay, cool. I'm thinking of the other class. So you guys, led by Taylor, sort of accosted me and got me in trouble with Mr. Ruddick this morning. It was a question of close reading, I think, that you were asking me. So do you want to talk a little bit about the question that you asked me and the confusion that might have arisen from that? It's okay. It's not an embarrassing question. It's all right.
Okay. I thought that she died. I asked if Julia died in the God attack by the bomb.
Okay, so let's turn to that section. It's a big long paragraph that begins with "As it happened, they never went back to the clearing in the wood." If you have the paperback, it's on page 128 and 106, 107. I'm hearing strange voices from people who aren't here. That's odd. Okay, so let's get to the part where you would have potentially encountered that error. So they're sort of walking. They're walking through the streets, and Orwell describes the nature of how they had to run their relationship. And how would you describe how this sort of relationship flowed? I mean, were they able to see each other with frequency?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They got to see each other in the crowded areas, like how they did when they first actually talked, not looking at each other,
Yeah.
still talking, but not interacting.
Right.
As I said in the book, they were talking in installments or whatever.
Good.
It was off and on.
Yeah, I had that part underlined too, and you can sort of imagine that they kind of had to, time was of the essence, so they couldn't catch up and hug and kiss every time they saw each other, so they had to almost pick up their conversations directly where they stopped off, and you can imagine how sort of jarring and odd that type of relationship was. And so then what happened that led us to this question of whether Julia was dead? Now, another thing you guys can decide on your own is whether you want to go through the formality of having people raise hands, or if you think that you can just handle the responsibility of sort of talking in turn and not stepping on each other's toes. It's any way you want to handle it. So what do you think, Sarah?
A rocket bomb hit and she was really white and he started kissing.
Yeah. Yes. That's a quick way to say it. The rocket bomb hit and she sort of landed kind of on top of him, didn't she? A rocket bomb must have dropped quite near at hand. Suddenly he became aware of Julia's face a few centimeters from his own, deathly white as chalk. Even her lips were white. She was dead. And yes, I mean, that's a pretty definitive way to say it. What was the whiteness all over her? If it wasn't, in fact, death, and the pallor of death, it was what?
Plaster.
It was plaster, right? From bombs, from streets, from buildings, whatever. He clasped her, so you have to continue, and you have to continue a close reading. He clasped her hands against him, found that he was kissing a live, warm face. So she isn't dead. They're both covered with this stuff. So it's clear, right, that Julia is alive, right? Everybody realizes that Julia is alive? All you invisible people in the background? Okay. What else from what you read last night did you want to talk about or ask about? Or
Julia's 26 years old.
Julie's 26 years old. To Winston's what? Do you remember how old Winston was?
39.
He's 39. And the age difference sort of manifests a lot of other differences between them. But I'm not quite sure if you got to yet, to be honest. No, you haven't. But do you think that age difference could pose a problem in their relationship? I mean, think about it. What, Anthony? Why not?
It was didn't they say if you want to be a couple, you couldn't be attracted to each other, so that could probably be
Oh, so it would almost enable them a greater possibility of actually being a sanctioned married couple, because there's no way that cute little Julia could be attracted to Winston. Okay, good. Other thoughts? Why might it or might it not pose a problem, Kelly?
I don't think that their age matters because she was already just attracted to him because he was different. So if she if the age mattered, then she wouldn't have looked at him. I think she could tell if he was 40.
Right.
So I don't think that it mattered because he looked different.
Yeah, so age is a superficiality. It doesn't make a difference. She's attracted. We talked about this yesterday, right? She's attracted to his rebellion and he's attracted to hers. Can you think of any ways in which the age, I mean, it's not an issue in the way that it might be an issue today, a 40-year-old and a 25-year-old or something like that. That might be a little bit odd. And I think Taylor's right that age, and Anthony's right that age in that way doesn't make a difference. But can you imagine a scenario in which age might make a difference? How might age create a gap between them in terms of what they've grown up seeing, what they've grown up experiencing?
Like how Winston is probably more mature than Julia, and Julia's still like learning things about like the world, and like Winston knows since he's like older.
Okay.
And
Let me ask a follow-up question. Does it seem like Winston knows more than Julia?
no.
It almost seems
That's
the opposite,
that's
doesn't
the
it?
thing, because Julia's more knowledgeable than Winston seems.
Yeah, she is. She has ways of getting things. She knew Winston's name. He didn't know hers. All that stuff. So that doesn't account for maturity, but the knowledge seems to be on the side of Julia. Can you think of any other ways in which age might make a difference? Go ahead.
Like she never saw the world before his brother came, and he was.
Right. And although it's important to recognize, although Winston doesn't really remember clearly life before the Revolution, the fact of having lived before the Revolution might potentially make a difference. And in fact, I think you'll see that as this chapter continues. So the age is a very important thing. What else? What else did you want to mention? Did we find out any other information about Julia professionally?
Yeah, a lot of her jobs and stuff.
Yeah. What section of the fiction department does she work on? It's the most embarrassing section.
The porn big
Yeah,
section.
the porno sec, right? Let's speak a little newspeak here. Let's get with it. What did you find interesting about the description of the porno sec? There was one particularly interesting detail.
That it's like mostly all girls except for the head of the section.
Yeah, all of the workers are girls. Isn't that
Or
odd?
married woman.
Yeah. Why? How did Orwell account for that? Why only girls working on pornography? It seems odd. Marcus?
Because it said like if they were guys that like they would have like a greater danger of being like corrupt by filth.
Mhm.
And, like so like if it was guys like people wouldn't like it, I guess, because it's girls.
Yeah, remember, and that connects with what Orwell told us earlier, is that the sexual instinct was way easier to squash in women than it was in men, and so it wouldn't have sort of aroused any interest or intrigue from the women. They were just doing their jobs. Anything else that you wanted to mention?
She worked on novel writing machines.
Yeah, isn't that sort of? I mean, we've talked about it a lot, but that's sort of like the absolute antithesis of how we think of a novel, right? If you think of a novel, it's this ultimate expression of feeling and emotion, right? I mean, it's storytelling, and they like punch it out on machines, like they punch in codes and they mix up like figures and words, and it just kind of spits out these novels. That does Julia read them? No, she doesn't care, right? She doesn't care about it because it's like making shoelaces, I think she said, right? It's like or licorice or something. It's like any other job. So, in that way, Big Brother's been successful in squashing that instinct. Marcus?
That I found it interesting that she lives with 30 other girls.
Yeah.
She doesn't like girls.
She hates girls, right? It's sort of funny. Yeah, that she's, again, and she says, that girls are supposed to represent this purity, and while the other girls might, she certainly doesn't. Anything else? A couple of other interesting things that I wanted to mention. If you can, go ahead, Marcus.
Before the 60s, like the only person she talked to was her grandfather.
Yeah. So she does mention something of a relative that would have had knowledge of life before the Revolution. That's important to note. The other thing that I wanted to mention, if you look at the paragraph after the one that I had you look at, she talks about camouflage, right? If you look about the middle of the paragraph, she spent an astonishing amount of time in attending lectures. The paragraph begins, there were evenings when they reached their rendezvous and then had to walk past one another without a sign. Do you find that paragraph? Okay. Find the middle of it where it says she spent an astonishing amount of time, and somebody just read a couple sentences from there for us, please. Go ahead, Marcus.
She spent an astonishing amount of time in attending lectures and demonstrations, distributing literature for the Anti-Sex League, preparing banners for Hate Week, making collections for the Savings Campaign, and such like activities.
Keep going. Just one more sentence.
It page, she
Or
said,
two more.
it was a camouflage. If you kept the small rules, you could break the big
What do you think of that? What do you think of the sort of way she lives her life? It was camouflage. In what way was her life in front of Big Brother kind of camouflage?
She went around like supporting Big Brother with the scarlet sash and the banners and working extra hours, but like behind it all, she just did it so she could break the bigger rules, except
Uh-huh.
for everyone and stuff.
So does that make sense to you? Does that, I mean, do you have any comments about that? If you kept the small rules, you could break the big ones. Sam?
It's clever.
It is clever, and that's important to note about Julia, right? In some ways, you're going to find that she's not at all clever. But in some ways, she's really, really bright, and she's way more with it than Winston. Would you say that? Is that fair to say? I mean, she has planned her entire life around being able to be independent in ways that are really kind of astoundingly clever. Any other thoughts, Marcus?
She kind of kept like a low profile. Like she did like what was told and like not any extra or any less. So,
Somebody
like,
argue with that. Somebody disagree with that. Go ahead.
I think that she was like, she would put herself out there so that she would be least expected to break the rules.
Yeah, I think Winston keeps a low profile because Winston doesn't give a darn, right? But she's out there, right? She's not just marching in the parades. She's holding the banner. She's at the front. She's on the float. She's spending extra time here at the community center, or the extra time here, putting in extra work there, because, as Taylor says, when she goes and breaks the rules, she wants to be the one they least suspect. Just an interesting side note: where is it that they've been meeting recently?
Abandoned church.
Yeah, an old, like, broken down, disheveled, abandoned church. Just an interesting sort of borderline religious connection that Orwell makes there. Anything else you need to say or ask about, Marcus?
that she was the captain of a hockey team and won gymnastics with me. I find it just
Yeah, she's fit. She's an athlete for sure. Good. Anything else? All right, so let's pick up where you guys left off. And this is when I say that their age might begin to draw a division between them. I don't mean like they're going to fall apart. They're going to not be able to make their relationship work. But the age comes into play here in a significant way. And let's see if we can kind of figure out in what way that is. You all right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So she had her first love affair. Remember, she said she's been with scores of party members, and he says, "The more you've been with, the more I love you, because you're sort of this image of impurity, and I love that." Somebody read through that paragraph for us, please. And again, you can decide in your groups when you're doing these readings if you want to read aloud, if you want to read independently, and just say read up to this point, and then we'll reconvene and chat. It's totally up to you. You're running your own show. In this case, I'd just like somebody to read this paragraph for us. Go ahead.
She had her first love affair when she was 16 with a party member of 60 who later committed suicide to avoid arrest. And a good job too, said Julia. Otherwise, they'd have had my name out of him when he confessed. Since then, there had been various others. Life as she saw it was quite simple. You wanted a good time. They, meaning the party, wanted to stop you having it. You broke the rules as best you could. She seemed to think it just as a natural that they should want to rob you of your pleasures, and as that you should want to avoid being caught. She hated the party and said so in the crudest words, but she made no general criticism of it. Except where she touched upon her own life, she had no interest in party doctrine. He noticed that she never used newspeak words, except the ones that had passed into everyday use. She never heard of the Brotherhood and refused to believe in its existence. Any kind of organized revolt against the party, which was bound to be a failure, struck her as stupid. The clever thing was to break the rules and stay alive all the time. He wondered vaguely how many others like her there might be in the younger generation, people who had grown up in the world of revolution, knowing nothing else accepting the party as something unalterable like the sky, not rebelling against its authority but simply evading it as a rabbit dodges a dog.
Okay. A couple things to point out there. First of all, to speak to Anthony and Taylor's point that the age doesn't matter in the way that it does to us. in terms of relationships, either emotional relationships or physical relationships. What evidence to prove that they're right does Orwell cite here? Okay.
She slept with someone that was 60 years old.
And she was
16?
She was 16, and so we find here that age is sort of inconsequential. That all she, do you imagine that she was sleeping with that guy because like he was hot or rich or like, had something that she wanted in that way? Why was she sleeping with him?
Probably look like a them, like different.
Okay. So let's extrapolate that. Let's pull out from that. Why would she, presumably a relatively attractive 16-year-old girl, sleep with a guy who was 60 years old? Thinking how old Winston seems at 39. I mean, this guy must have been ancient. He must have been like falling apart. So why would she sleep with him, Anthony?
Well, she said she liked to outwit them.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess she wanted to she had expected that he would break the law, and then something would have happened to him.
I don't know if I entirely understand. Can you clarify that a little bit?
It's illegal.
Yeah.
So, and she said that she likes to outwit, So
Okay.
she most likely just wanted to break the law.
Right. Good. That's good. I think you're dead on. I think you're dead on there. I mean, he could have been 100, right? He could have been 100, and she could have been 10. It wouldn't have mattered. I mean, I know that to us in 2013, that's gross and maybe impossible. But the point is that the age didn't matter. That it was a way to demonstrate that impurity was possible. It was a way to kind of say screw you to Big Brother, right? And she took any opportunity she could. Where, if you look deeper into that paragraph, you can see evidence that their age difference isn't causing a problem necessarily, but that it is the birth of other differences between them. What other difference begins to come to light because of their age differences, the generation gap? Yeah, Sam.
That she was born into the world of the revolution and
Yeah. So what difference does that make? If you think in terms of the type of rebellion that they both stand for, because they both stand for rebellion, right? I mean, we can agree on that. But the rebellion that they stand for, or the rebellion that they try to enact, is very different from one another. And it's very different because of that generation gap, because of what Sandra says, one was born before the revolution and one was born into this world. So how does Winston begin to see this difference between their types of rebellion? Yeah?
I think Winston just wants to change, and Julia just wants to stick it to the man, I guess.
Okay, I'd like to take that somewhere. Can somebody sort of pick up on what Anthony was saying? What's the difference between at the end of the day? What is Winston's, even though it might be completely unattainable, and frankly it probably is, what is Winston's ultimate goal via rebellion? What is the ultimate thing he would love to be able to accomplish?
And Big Brother.
Good. To be able to overthrow Big Brother, right? So he talks about grand forms of rebellion like what? What's the grandest form of rebellion he talks about? What's the organization?
The Brotherhood.
The Brotherhood, right? What does Julia have to say about the Brotherhood?
I don't know it exists.
Yeah, she's never even heard of it, right? And that is indicative of these differences. His rebellion is grand, right? Get together with this organization and potentially overthrow Big Brother. Now, he's not fooling himself into thinking that it's possible, but if he had his way, that's what he would do, right? So how does that differ from Julia's methods or Julia's mentality about rebellion?
I think Julia might have been born before this revolution because she wouldn't have known any other life before that. So how would she know?
Okay, so are you then questioning whether she's being honest, or you're questioning you think that she might be older than she's saying?
I don't know, because she wouldn't have wanted a rebellion if she didn't know any other time.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point, right? If you don't know that there are better ways, then it's impossible to think of rebellion. I think that that's a good point. But let's assume for the time being that she was born when she says. How does her form of rebellion differ from Winston's?
Her rebellion differs because she just wants to have a good time, it says. you wanted a good time, they say, but then they stopped you from having it. But
Yeah.
he just wants to go back to normal instead.
Yeah, or whatever normal is.
Yeah.
So can you see in some really important ways that his rebellion is a potential entire governmental overthrow, and her rebellion is going out and having a good time. Her rebellion is a rebellion of one, and his rebellion is potentially a rebellion of everybody. Does that make sense? It might be something worth noting. All you invisible people. It might be something worth jotting down. That his form of rebellion, or his idea of rebellion, is something much grander, it seems, than her form of rebellion. And can you see that is a reflection of the age difference, right? That because he has some inkling that life for everybody can be better, that's what he wants to push for. But for her, she doesn't even think, she doesn't acknowledge the brotherhood, she doesn't acknowledge rebellion on a full scale. It's all about her rebelling in her own way. Does that make sense? Please tell me if it doesn't. At this point, anybody else can tell me if that doesn't make sense. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's continue on if we could get a new reader. Marcus, they did not discuss.
They did not discuss the possibility of getting married. It was too remote to be worth thinking about. No imaginable committee would ever sanction such a marriage, even if Captain Winston's wife could somehow have been got rid of. It was hopeless even as a debut. What was she like? Your wife, said Julia. She was, do you know the Newspeak word good thinkful? Meaning naturally orthodox, incapable of thinking a bad person thought? No, I didn't know the word, but I knew the person. I knew the kind of person right enough.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He began telling her the story of his married life, but curiously enough, she appeared to know the essential parts of it already. She described to him almost as though she had seen or felt it, the stiffening of Catherine's body as soon as he touched her, the way in which she still seemed to be pushing him from her with all the strength, even with her arms were clasped tightly around her. With Julia, he felt no difficulty in talking about such things. Catherine, in any case, had long ceased to be painful memory and became merely a distasteful one.
Okay, so Orwell via Winston is going to go on to talk a little bit more about what's been happening to the sex instinct and why it's so important for Big Brother to sort of squash it. Do you have anything to say before we continue a little bit? Okay. I could have stood it if it hadn't been for one thing he said. He told her about the frigid little ceremony that Catherine had forced him to go through on the same night every week. She hated it, but nothing could make her stop doing it. She used to call it, but you'll never guess. Our duty to the party, said Julia promptly. How did you know that? I've been at school too, dear. Sex talks once a month for the over 16s, and in the youth movement. They rub it into you for years. I dare say it works in a lot of cases, but of course, you can never tell. People are such hypocrites. She began to enlarge upon the subject. With Julia, everything came back to her own sexuality. As soon as this was touched upon in any way, she was capable of great acuteness. Unlike Winston, she had grasped the inner meaning of the party's sexual puritanism. It was not merely that the sex instinct created a world of its own which was outside the party's control, and which therefore had to be destroyed if possible. What was more important was that the sexual privation induced hysteria, which was desirable because it could be transformed into war fever and leader worship. The way she put it was, and we'll go through this in a second, but I want to make sure that you understand that one sentence. What was more important than squashing it or eliminating the sexual desire was that the sexual privation or the limiting or the taking away of sex induced hysteria. What's hysteria? Where have you heard that root before? Hysterical. Okay, hysterical. If somebody goes hysterical.
They're crazy.
Yeah, it means to go batty. It means to lose your mind, to lose control of your faculties, right? We've all sort of been there where we almost sort of embrace that primitive, savage side of us. We're kind of uncivilized momentarily. So what does that mean? What was more important, bless you, what was more important was that sexual privation induced hysteria. What does that mean? Sexual privation induced hysteria. To induce means to grow into or to turn into. To be restricted.
Oh.
What does it mean?
With no sex, they went crazy.
Bingo! They could take that lack of sex, right, as an output, a feeling of emotion. They could take it and they could turn it into this craziness. And they took that craziness and did what with it? If you think of just this big ball of energy, and we're not letting it escape. It's just bouncing around. It's going crazy. They take that energy and they turn it into what? Into hate for. For what?
For like the hate into the actual act.
So we're moving away from the idea of sex in general, but they're taking that energy that the people want to take out in that way. It's turning into a hysteria, and they're redirecting that hysteria towards what?
Like Goldstein and his
Goldstein.
people.
And who's the enemy today? Who? Who's the enemy? Who are we at war with today?
Eurasia.
We're at war with Eurasia. So against Goldstein and against Eurasia, and they also turn that same energy into love for
Big Brother.
Big Brother. Good. So can you see how that works in his favor? He wants to get rid of sex, but he doesn't want to get rid of the energy that sort of goes into that. He wants to take it and redirect it. Does that make sense? Okay. And she goes on to quote or to say, when you make love, you're using up energy, and afterwards you feel happy and you don't give a damn for anything. They can't bear you to feel like that. They want you to be bursting with energy all the time. All this marching up and down and cheering and waving flags is simply sex gone sour. That's one of my favorite expressions. If you're happy inside yourself, why should you get excited about Big Brother and the 3-year plans and the 2 minutes hate and all the rest of their bloody rot? Does it make sense? They're sort of caging, they're sort of redirecting that sexual instinct. Do you have anything that you want to say or ask about that? Anything at all? You cool with it?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's do this. Let's have you guys read the next paragraph. All of you read the next paragraph independently. We'll talk about that, and then although your sessions will go the duration of the period minus 5 minutes, we'll stop and chat about how it went. Okay? So just read the next paragraph independently. You can choose to do this in your groups for everything if you want to. Look up when you're done so we know you can. It's going to be the most exciting part of the video. Orwell talks a little bit at the end of that paragraph about family and how the idea of family has changed, right? He says Big Brother couldn't get rid of the family entirely. So what did he do instead of wiping out that idea of family? What did he do?
Did the kids turn against parents?
Yeah, and what family do we immediately think of? We think of the Parsons, right? We think that if Parsons ever did anything bad, remember that scene, I think, in the canteen when he was bragging about his crazy, horrible little daughter and like following somebody and turning them over and weird shoes and all that stuff. We think immediately of the crazy little Parsons children. And that, he couldn't abolish what it meant to be a parent, but he could alter what it meant to be a child. It's a powerful line, I think. The family had become, in effect, an extension of the thought police, right? So he doesn't change the fact that there are families, but he totally changes what it means to be a family, doesn't he? Is there anything else that you pulled out from that paragraph that you want to say or ask? Okay, you understand what's going on here with these natural human emotions and how Big Brother can kind of reach his hand into the human heart, take the emotions out and turn them into whatever he wants, right? So hopefully it's clear to you. And what I'm going to ask you guys to do, what I'm going to ask all you to do, is it's only a couple pages, but to have at least the rest of that chapter read by the time that we return on Monday. Are there any closing questions or thoughts or comments about this session? You guys all feel good about it? Okay, I feel like you understand everything we read, even though we weren't necessarily taking notes as we were supposed to be doing. All right, end scene.